Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. By way of introduction, my name is Seth Schwartz, and I'm the head of JP Morgan's Healthcare Investment Banking team here in Australia. It's my great pleasure to welcome Paradigm Biopharmaceuticals to the 2021 JP Morgan Healthcare Conference. With us today is Paul Rennie, the CEO of Paradigm, and with that, I'll hand over to Paul to take us through his presentation.
Thank you very much, Seth, and also thank you very much to the JP Morgan Network for the opportunity to make a presentation to this healthcare conference. Next slide, please. So I'm on slide 2. And as Seth said, I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Paradigm Biopharmaceuticals. And I would like to start off by saying that I have been searching for the Holy Grail for osteoarthritis treatment, especially for moderate to severe osteoarthritis, for the best part of 20 years. I've had a lot of experience in the biotech sector, particularly in the orthopedic space. And I know that everyone listening has probably listened to many different presentations and had many meetings to attend. So I really want to leave this presentation with 2 key take-home messages. The first message is that our drug, which is trademarked xylitol, may well be the Holy Grail for the treatment of osteoarthritis. And I'll speak a little bit more about that later on. But this is, I think, really quite a significant breakthrough in the treatment for patients with osteoarthritis. Secondly, our company Paradigm is about to make an IND submission to the US FDA to commence a pivotal phase 3 clinical trial. So we are a very late stage asset, and we're obviously seeking to talk to investors and also to talk to big pharma companies in relation to the opportunity. Next slide, please. Slide 3, we deal with the legal component of the presentation, which is our standard disclaimer, and obviously drawing attention to forward-looking statements, and just highlighting that many of the dates that you will see in the presentation are management's best estimate. Paradigm does have a very good track record of adhering to its timelines. So we are confident in those timelines, but we do highlight that there are some significant challenges with the global pandemic at the moment in terms of recruitment centres and the speed of recruitment, but we'll keep the market up to date with those developments as we go through the phase 3 clinical program. Next slide, please. I'm on slide 4, and this is a opportunity to introduce Paradigm. Paradigm is listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and in 2020, Paradigm joined the ASX 300 group of companies listed on the ASX. Our mission is to develop new solutions for medical indications of high unmet medical need by looking at the issue from a different perspective. And often we've found that the answers of these challenges lie in drugs that have already been on the market. There has been quite a deal of scientific information published about these agents, and we can compile that into what we think is a combination or searching for drugs that have multiple pharmaceutical actions to treat some of these unmet medical needs, such as osteoarthritis. And Paradigm does have a global team of experts with unique global scientific, regulatory and pharmaceutical development capabilities to identify, develop and commercialise these opportunities. And we'll speak largely about osteoarthritis today, but we do have a pipeline, which I'll touch on, showing that we do have more product opportunities in the near term. I'm going on to slide 5. Thank you. As I just mentioned, our first development program focuses on the drug pentazan polysulfate sodium, or PPS, which we have trademarked as xylitol, and it has a rich pipeline of potential new indications over and above osteoarthritis. Our lead indication for managing pain and improving joint function and modifying the progression of the disease in osteoarthritis. And I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail in a moment. We're also investigating the same drug, PPS, but under a different treatment regimen for the rare genetic disorder of mucopolysaccharidosis. Now, people who are familiar with that orphan indication would know that these days, many of the patients suffering from this genetic disorder are treated at a young age, and it's getting earlier and earlier post-diagnosis down to, in some cases, their first years of life with the enzyme replacement therapy. And ERT therapy has been very significant in being able to extend the longevity of the patients. However, what enzyme replacement therapy has not been able to achieve is a significant reduction in the chronic arthralgia and myalgia associated with the disease. And we are hoping that with MPS in combination with ERT therapy, which is the standard of care, that we may be able to bring some relief to these subjects who are still suffering from significant pain and joint functionality. I'm pleased to report that in 2020, just last year, we commenced a phase 2 study, an open label study for MPS type 1, which is currently underway in Adelaide, South Australia, which has an expected completion date of 2023. I believe we've recruited our first 3 subjects to that trial, and at this point in time, everything is progressing very well. The larger subset of MPS patients is MPS 6, and this is the subset of the 7 different types of MPS that is largely affected by musculoskeletal arthralgia and myalgia. So we will be commencing our phase 2 study of MPS 6 in Brazil, where there has been identified a very large cohort of MPS 6 sufferers, around 200 subjects in Brazil. In addition, chronic arthralgia and myalgia is an enduring and debilitating symptom for people who suffer from alpha virus infection, or also known as viral arthritis. The alpha virus is transmitted to humans through mosquitoes. And in 2020, we completed a phase 2 pilot study looking at the effects of this same drug, PPS, and it provided near remission of symptoms of arthralgia in 72% of the sufferers, compared to only 14.3% in the placebo group. We did publish in the Journal of Virology a preclinical model which looked at infecting rodents with the different viruses, both Ross River virus and chikungunya virus, and we did see very significant improvements in the symptoms, but most importantly, we looked in great detail at the biomarkers and showed that the drug pentazene polysulfate sodium was able to preserve the cartilage matrix, which is severely damaged during alphavirus infections. We also have other clinical indications in the pipeline, such as our investigation, which is commencing into chronic heart failure with preserved ejection fraction and acute respiratory distress syndrome. Both of these advanced preclinical studies are underway at the moment, and the data is starting to roll in. In parallel to these development programs of PPS, we are continuing to explore the potential of other molecules which are applying a similar methodology to the methodology we've used to repurpose PPS to unlock the unmet medical needs of other chronic indications. I'm moving on to slide 6, please. So now we're going to talk quite specifically about our lead indication, osteoarthritis. And osteoarthritis is a huge blockbuster opportunity, as anyone who's worked in the musculoskeletal field will know. And 2 points about osteoarthritis. The first is osteoarthritis is a disease of the entire joint structures, which include the bone, the cartilage, and the synovium and other tissues. So it is a disease that progresses over time, and it's largely where the rate of degeneration exceeds the rate of regeneration. So the normal balance between generation and regeneration has now shifted entirely to degeneration, and the joint is starting to rapidly degrade. The symptoms of osteoarthritis are painful and swollen joints, as most people would know. Now, touching on the Holy Grail, it is been described in the literature by many different authors. The Holy Grail refers to a therapeutic product that could alleviate the symptoms of pain and swollen joints and restore joint function, but most importantly, at the same time, slow the disease down significantly, or maybe even stop the disease from progressing. That is the Holy Grail, a drug that is safe and effective in reducing the symptoms of osteoarthritis, but at the same time, also reducing the rate of degeneration and trying to restore the natural balance between degeneration and regeneration, allowing the joint to heal. And as I said at the outset, one of my major take-home messages to anyone who's interested in the musculoskeletal space is that this may be the Holy Grail for osteoarthritis sufferers, and we're very excited with our data that we've generated to date. Our excitement comes from the huge size of this market. So as slide 6 shows, we have OA market potential, 72 million sufferers in the regions of the United States, Canada, EU5 and Australia. We know that hip and knee osteoarthritis comprises 69% of that 72 million subjects. And we also know that there's a high rate of dissatisfaction by both doctors and patients in terms of safe and effective therapies as this disease progresses into the moderate to severe stage of the disease. So largely dissatisfied end users of the product, massive market which is only getting larger as time rolls forward. We know that the osteoarthritis market is likely to almost double within the next decade because of the obesity epidemic and also the aging population. So it is a market that is going to grow within itself very significantly. And at the moment, after many, many years of research, we know that there's still no drug that has had these disease-modifying effects being brought to market. And the drugs that are on the market for the symptomatic relief of osteoarthritis work well in the early stages, but as the disease progresses, they're no longer effective, hence the high rates of dissatisfaction. And to put that market size into perspective, we note in the grey box below those numbers, there's a section which talks about rheumatoid arthritis. Now we know rheumatoid arthritis is less prevalent than osteoarthritis. In fact, it's about 1/10 the size of the market of osteoarthritis. And rheumatoid arthritis is largely dominated now by the blocking antibodies of TNF and IL-6. And you can see that that is a massive market now of $33 billion. So if you times that by 10, obviously we're talking about a true blockbuster potential for treating osteoarthritis. Slide 7, please. So I've put some deals on this particular slide, and the point is not to say that any of these therapies are inadequate in any way. It's just simply to highlight that down the second column, you'll see that there's a target, and all of these targets are monospecific targets. But even though they're monospecific targets, you can still see that there is very high level of pharmaceutical interest in the space. And there's a lot of pharmaceutical companies paying a lot of money to get into this space, obviously because of the size of the market that is developing right now. As I mentioned, we know that with the Pfizer-Lilly compound tanezumab, it's got a single monospecific target of NGF. We also know that the Galapagos compound, which unfortunately for that company read out results in late 2020, found that their monospecific target of targeting Adam's TS5 was unsuccessful in changing the projection of the disease and didn't have any symptomatic relief. So it's a program that is in doubt in terms of whether it continues. Now, I'll go on to slide 8, please. Now, this is where I think that the first key message of the Holy Grail comes in, and it also indicates the paradigm shift and gives some explanation to our history. So the first thing to note is that PPS is a molecule of size between 4,000 and 6,000 Daltons. And we know that the primary molecule is a 5-sugar-based carbohydrate, which is then semi-synthetically hypersulfated to give it a very strong negative charge. And not unlike the heparin molecule, although heparin is a 6-sugar molecule and is different in its mechanism of action. However, to draw a parallel, it's within that heparinoid space. Now, in addition, like heparin, PPS has the primary molecule, which is the PPS, but it also comprises up to 70 submolecules or molecules that are within that molecule. And the FDA described that to us as a molecule with multiple moieties. In other words, multiple chemical entities within that one chemical entity. And it's these extra chemical entities that give pentazan polysulfate this unique characteristic of being a multimodal acting drug. So it works on a number of different disease pathways at the same time. And this is what we think is very important to solving a chronic and complex disease like osteoarthritis. Osteoarthritis has multiple pathways upregulated at the one time. And just focusing on the enzymes that break down cartilage, as per the last slide, the example of the Adams TS5 focus, doesn't necessarily provide any true relief to the disease. It's got to be a concerted and synchronized effort of these different molecules to address various aspects of the disease process. And this is what we found that Paradigm, this is what Paradigm has been able to find with this particular drug. And it was in a conversation with a number of scientists that after we had reviewed like literally thousands of papers on osteoarthritis, we agreed that maybe for a complex disease like osteoarthritis, which was not just an inflammatory disease, but it has these other components to it, such as the cartilage breakdown. It also has changes to the vascular flow to the subchondral bone, and so on and so on, that maybe we need to have a paradigm shift in our thinking in terms of how we address a disease like osteoarthritis, and not look for one single target, but maybe look for drugs that have multiple activities. And that's really where the history of Paradigm came from. So Paradigm and the paradigm shift is the thinking applied to this complex disease. And we have, of course, a company name is Paradigm to reflect that, and the drug is xylosol to reflect that this is a sulfated xylane sugar. So hopefully from this particular slide, you can see that PPS acts through a central gateway for inflammation, which is the NF-kappa beta pathway. So below PPS is the NF-kappa beta, and that pathway is largely responsible for upregulating the expression of many of the inflammatory cytokines. So we know that NF-kappa beta is really the engine room of inflammation. And PPS acts on NF-kappa beta, and it also acts independently of NF-kappa beta. So in this example, we see that just above the inflammation, we have Roche and IL-6. IL-6 is one of a cascade of inflammatory factors. So again, back to the point, you really want to dampen down NF-kappa beta from expressing most, if not all, of the inflammatory factors, rather than just targeting and blocking one inflammatory cytokine like IL-6. And that was reflected when Roche published a report recently where they did a study on IL-6 in patients with hand osteoarthritis, and it failed to reach the primary endpoints. And again, we would come back and say that that's mainly because they're focused on one cytokine within a milieu of inflammatory cytokines that are upregulated at the same time. PPS also directly acts on the cells in the subchondral bone and also the cartilage cells. Bone and cartilage cells express a very potent pain signaling compound called nerve growth factor, NGF. So NGF is produced by these cells, which then is picked up by the peripheral nervous system, sending the signals back to the brain. And by blocking that signaling molecule, you can certainly reduce pain. But again, in this case, we know that blocking the entire molecule does have, for some reason, yet to be finally resolved, but some reason it does not come without consequences of some adverse events. So blocking antibodies of NGF have all been on clinical hold by the US FDA for these unexpected side effects of avascular necrosis or rapidly progressing osteoarthritis. And lowering the dose doesn't seem to be able to completely eliminate these side effects. However, blocking the signaling of that signaling molecule is an effective way of reducing pain. But PPS does this in a different way. PPS interacts with receptors on these cells, of the bone cells and the cartilage cells, and that was published in a peer-reviewed article. Stapleton et al. Was the lead author, and Catherine was able to show that PPS interacting with the cell is able to down-regulate the production of the signaling molecule, NGF. So it doesn't completely block it. So all that is produced is blocked by the antibody. This is actually producing less of the signaling NGF in the first place. And we believe that's the mechanism by which PPS reduces pain. Independent of an antibody, it's just switching down the expression of that signaling molecule. We also know, just looking at the Galapagos example again, that there are up to 20 proteolytic enzymes that are upregulated during osteoarthritis. Focusing on one, and probably the most dominant one is Adams TS5, has been shown by the Galapagos phase 2 study not to be successful in protecting the cartilage from breakdown and not effective in reducing the clinical symptoms of the disease. So what we have been able to gather from talking to researchers who've worked in this area, Troberg et al. From the UK, is that PPS works with the endogenous inhibitor, TIMP, to actually bind to the MMPs and the atoms TS4 and 5 and deactivate them at the source, rather than just having one blocked. A whole cascade of 20 proteolytic enzymes are again largely reduced, and therefore restoring that balance between degeneration and regeneration. And the final piece of the puzzle is returning good vascular flow to the subchondral bone, which is something that PPS, with its mild anticoagulant mechanism, is able to restore good vascular flow to the subchondral bone. If I could go to slide 9, please. On slide 9, we have a summary of our phase 2b data. On the top left-hand panel, this is the traditional reduction in pain from baseline, and you'll see that the top line showing less pain reduction is placebo, and below that is the PPS group. So they're the means at different time points across the study. And our primary endpoint was at day 53. And you can see that at day 53, we had nice separation from the placebo, and we passed our primary endpoint of reduction in pain. On the right-hand side of that panel is the results for the functional activities of daily living. And here we're seeing a larger increase in the results, showing that PPS is providing a much higher level of functional improvement compared to placebo. And in the bottom right-hand corner, there is an example of a very important biomarker, which is the bone marrow edema volume. These are shown up on MRI, and these bone marrow edema lesions can appear at the subchondral cartilage interface. And these are known to be very potent indicators for the site of the initial cartilage breakdown. These lesions get larger over time, and they are highly associated with increase in pain, increase in cartilage degeneration, increase rate to total knee arthroplasty, and so on. So it is generally a very potent signal that the disease is progressing. And you see these lesions in people with rheumatoid arthritis and other forms of disease as well. And these lesions are comprised of interstitial fluid, a buildup of inflammatory cells, also some microclotting, microemboli, and all of that is largely cleared and removed by the action of pentazan polysulfate sodium. So in this case, I think this is one of the first studies that has ever been shown worldwide where there was a very strong concordance between biomarkers and the clinical outcomes. So in other words, the large orange bars descending, showing a decrease in the bone marrow edema volume, both for the total joint and the medial compartment, reduction down close to 40% reduction. And in the placebo group, the natural history showing that the volume of the lesions is increasing upward of 25%. So the blue bars indicate natural progression of the disease. The orange bars, for the first time, show that the drug is working in a way that is showing one potent biomarker is actually going in the opposite direction and heading in a direction that is more akin to a joint without progressing osteoarthritis. So it's a reversal of the disease, if you like. So that is a very important finding from the phase 2b clinical trial. Now I need to move on fairly quickly, and I'll just touch on these slides very quickly, slide 10 is our arrangement with Bene Pharma, who are still the only FDA-approved supplier of PPS. And we have an exclusive supply and manufacturing agreement with them where Bene will only supply their FDA-approved product to Paradigm. Slide 11, please. Slide 11 is a slide on our Paradigm's patents that we have acquired or we have developed over the last 5 years. So Paradigm owns all of its patents. On to slide 12, please. Slide 12 gives an indication of the interactions that we've had with the regulatory authorities in the EU and also the FDA. So you can see starting in February 2020, we had our pre-IND meeting with the FDA. September 20, we had a very good feedback from the European Union that agreed that our study design would support registration should we have a successful phase 3. December 20, we had a type C response from the FDA. And this quarter 1 2021, we will be submitting our IND submission to the US FDA. And slide 13, please. This will be my last slide. This is our overall clinical program for osteoarthritis. So you can see down the left-hand side, there's Para-002, and that is our pivotal phase 3 trial, which will commence post the IND submission to the FDA, and that will commence this year with a readout in Q1 2023. So basically 24 months from now, we should have a readout from our pivotal study. The confirmatory study is Para-003, and you can see that we will have a readout from that study towards the end of calendar year 2023, and therefore put us in a position to go for registration. The other studies that are listed there are studies that are required for our discussions with the FDA when we get to the point of designing and determining the wording for our labeling. So they are considered, if you like, registration studies, and we thought it's important that we can do those studies at the same time as we're doing our phase 3 studies. So Seth, I'll wrap up there and just remind everyone of the two take-home messages. One is that I think maybe the data that Paradigm has generated thus far demonstrates that we may have the Holy Grail, but in 24 months we'll probably know for sure. And then secondly, we are a phase 3 stage company, and if any pharma companies are interested in the musculoskeletal space, we would love to speak to any of those companies that might be listening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present the Paradigm story.